Every time a financial crash happens, you're told the same story. This is a reset. Pain now, stability later. Lessons have been learned. And yet, the same crises keep coming back, bigger, faster, and more destructive. Here asks the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. If crashes are supposed to correct the system, why does the system come back stronger in the exact same direction? What if financial crashes aren't failures of the system? What if they're proof that the system is working exactly as designed? Tonight we're going to follow the money, the power, and the patterns, step by step, to understand why financial crashes never fix what caused them, and why they might actually reinforce it. Most people grow up believing crashes are accidents. It's a bad policy, a greedy banker, a reckless bubble. Just fix the mistake, punish a few villains, add some regulations, and the system heals itself. That's the official story, but history tells a very different one. Every major financial crash from the 1800s to today follows a disturbingly similar script. Different technologies, different countries, different excuses, but always the same outcome. To understand why, we need to rewind to where modern financial systems really began, not with money, but with debt. Before modern banking, money mostly represented stored labor or physical assets. Things like gold, silver, land, and goods. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, something radical happened. Banks realized they didn't need to store money to create power, they just needed to promise it. This is the birth of fractional reserve banking, the system where banks lend out far more money than they actually have in their vaults. Suddenly, debt became money, and money became a claim on the future. At first, this new system fueled incredible growth. Governments loved it because they could fund wars and expansion. Businesses loved it because they could invest and grow. Empires expanded faster than ever before. But there was a hidden condition baked in from day one. The entire system only works as long as debt keeps expanding. The moment that growth slows, everything becomes incredibly fragile. As the decades passed, financial systems didn't just tolerate this leverage, they became completely dependent on it. Banks earned more by lending more. Governments funded everything from wars to welfare through borrowing. Corporations boosted their profits with cheap credit, and households were pulled into the game with mortgages, student loans, and credit cards. Eventually, growth stopped coming from genuine productivity. It started coming from leverage. This is a crucial point. When an economy's growth is powered by debt instead of real output, crashes become inevitable. Not because people make mistakes, but because the math demands it. Debt compounds exponentially. Real economies simply don't. And when reality can no longer keep up with the promises made, the system breaks. So what is a financial crash? Really? It's not chaos. It's a moment of brutal accounting. It's when the system briefly and often violently admits, these debts cannot all be paid. Assets collapse in value, credit freezes up, confidence vanishes overnight. And this is the point where most people expect a reset. Bad debts should be wiped out. Bad institutions should be allowed to fail. Excessive risk should be punished. But that's not what happens. Instead, look closely at every major crash. The Great Depression, the 1970 stagflation crisis, the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the 2008 global financial crisis, the pandemic-era market shock. What's the common response? Governments step in. Central banks print astronomical amounts of money. Interest rates are slashed to zero. The losses are socialized. The public absorbs the damage through inflation, higher taxes, stagnant wages, and a silent reduction in their purchasing power. Meanwhile, the financial core, the very institutions that caused the crisis, are stabilized. They are not reformed. They're not dismantled. They're stabilized. Why? Because allowing the system to truly reset would mean something politically unthinkable. Admitting that debt-driven growth has its limits. After every crash, you see a flurry of activity. New regulations are passed. Stress tests are implemented. Oversight committees are formed. We get rules with names like too big to fail. They all look very serious. They sound technical and complex. And they reassure the public that the problem has been solved. But notice what these reforms never, ever change. Money is still created through debt. Banks still profit from massive leverage. Governments still depend on borrowing. Asset price inflation is still actively encouraged. And most importantly, losses are still absorbed downward onto the public. Crashes don't lead to structural change because the structure itself cannot survive real change. Fixing the system would mean shrinking it. And shrinking it would mean less power, less control, and a level of political instability, at least in the short term, that no one in charge is willing to face. So instead, the system is patched up and made even bigger. Think about it. After 2008, we were all told, never again. So what happened? Global debt exploded to levels never seen before in human history. Interest rates were held near zero for over a decade, forcing savers and investors into riskier and riskier assets just to get any kind of return. Housing prices soared, completely detaching from local wages. Stock markets hit all-time highs while the real economy struggled. Speculation became normalized. Then the next shock came, and once again, the response was exactly the same. More liquidity, more intervention, more debt. Each cycle solves the immediate problem by simply kicking the can down the road, making the next crash not just inevitable, but potentially much, much worse. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feedback loop. So here's the part that is rarely said out loud. Crashes are actually useful to the system. Why? Because they consolidate power. In a crash, small players and unprepared individuals get wiped out. Large institutions with access to bailouts survive. Assets are transferred on a massive scale from the vulnerable to the capital rich, often at pennies on the dollar. The debt doesn't disappear, just changes hands. And after each crisis, the system becomes more centralized, more complex, and even harder for the average person to challenge. Crashes don't fix the system. They discipline society into accepting it. So let's boil this down to 3 key takeaways. First, financial crashes are not corrections. They are containment events. They prevent a total collapse without ever allowing for fundamental reform. Second, debt-based systems cannot self-correct without shrinking, and shrinking the system is politically avoided at all costs. And third, every single bailout pushes the risk upward to the taxpayer while pushing the consequences and losses downward onto the public. If crashes never truly fix the system, and if fixing the system threatens the very people in power, then the real question isn't if another crash is coming. The real question is whether the next one will be used to centralize even more. Controller if it will finally force a reckoning that we haven't seen in modern history. If this changed how you see financial crises, don't let the conversation stop here. Subscribe, share this with someone who still believes that crashes are just accidents, and always stay curious. Because the most dangerous systems aren't the ones that fail, or the ones that survive unchanged. Thanks for watching.